Okay.
ठीक है.
Dr. Rihan, I've just sent you a WhatsApp message. Maybe just set up a group chat for all of us in case somebody wants to say something but not on the call.
ठीक है. तो मैं आपको एक हमारा ग्रुप बना उसमें ऐड कर देता हूँ. ठीक है.
ठीक है.
उसमें मैं ऐड करने लगा था, वो ऐड नहीं हो पाया था. मेरा ख्याल है कि we should start admitting people here.
Yeah.
मैं आपको ऐड करने की कोशिश करता हूँ नवीद इसमें है.
Okay, so I'm starting admitting people. Okay.
जी.
Side.
Okay, who wants to listen? Hello, everyone.
Hello. Can we please put the mics on mute? Okay, it's 7 p.m. We're about to start the program, and I'll run this video.
Zishan, you have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good evening, all. Welcome to this exciting journey brought to you by All Sports Alberta Foundation. We are live on Zoom, we're live on YouTube at the moment, and bringing you an inspirational tale from an inspirational guy. We're excited, very, very excited to be part of this inspirational talk today. My name is Zishan Khan, and I am one of the volunteers for the All Sports Alberta Foundation. We would like to play one more quick video for you guys, and then we will go through the other introductions and other stuff. Pasha bhai, could you play the Drew video, please?
This is Naveed.
And I'm the only person who ever walked across Pakistan alone.
This man is a warrior, an adventure junkie, and an all-around awesome dude who will leave you stunned when you hear his stories. A native of Karachi but raised in New York, Naveed got a gig making stories for the BBC, but not the kind of stories about butterflies and rainbows.
Sort of like helping journalists cover hostile news coverage. So my job was to watch their backs while they did their job. A couple of years ago, there was this school massacre in Peshawar at the Army Public School. And my news team was the first news team allowed access into the auditorium. So, without getting gory, there was a lot of bodies and blood and still like smoke hadn't even cleared up from the attack. And I think it was at that point when I realized that I had seen enough death and destruction and evil that I sent my resignation notice to my boss in London. And 2 months later, I packed up my bags, my dog, and we traveled up north to Hunza, rented a house, and that kind of changed my life. I haven't looked back.
What inspired him to start walking?
I saw an article on National Geographic about a guy walking across the earth. That kind of inspired me and planted a little bug in my brain that kept like gnawing at me for 2 years until I decided one day that I'm going to walk across at least Pakistan, if not the world. I would like to at least walk across the country. So I started walking from the China border, which is at about 5,600 meters. And that was October 1st. I walked across the Karachi Highway. Now it's just getting really cold. Snowing. I'm afraid I'm not gonna make it before nightfall. So I'm making a run for it. And then I continued walking through the Grand Trunk Road to the Sindh Highway all the way to the Karachi port where you're coming from.
Where did he sleep?
Mosques, graveyards, police stations, side of the road, anywhere I could sleep, anywhere I could pitch a tent. I never had to worry about food, which I think you would agree. Pakistan, you will never go hungry.
Then the following year, Naveed walked from the Pakistan-Afghanistan border to the Wagah border of India. In total, he has walked over 5,100 kilometers solo through Pakistan, Afghanistan, and India. While it seems breathtaking, walking solo isn't always easy.
There were times when I just sat down and cried. There was a night I remember, it was like my second month into my first solo walk, where I was sleeping in a graveyard. And it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. I was writing like an email to my daughter, and I just started bawling. And the priest came out, and he asked me if I was okay, and I couldn't even like look at him. So that was the biggest challenge, was being alone for so long. Like humans, they need company.
Sure, man.
And we need distractions.
Now, Naveed runs an adventure travel company called Hunza on Foot, where he takes people on treks around the Hunza Valley and beyond. I just have a funny feeling that he's not going to stop living this lifestyle anytime soon. I'm Drubinski, and if you like my travel videos, please click subscribe and join me as I plan to visit every country in the world. This is Naveed.
And I'm the only person.
Awesome. Thank you, Pashabhai. That was amazing. What an inspiration. What a guy. Can't hear to hear from him. Before we start and go and talk to Naveed, I would like to introduce you to our panel for this evening. So on our panel, we have Dr. Abdul Rahman, Dr. Rahman Masood, we have Muhammad Irfan Pasha, and we have Dr. Wasim. And many thanks to our friend Zafar Yusfi. He's our tech guru who's providing all the technical background support to us and does it for many other programs. Thank you again, Zafar, for your time. A little bit about All Sports Alberta Foundation. All Sports Alberta Foundation is a non-profit society registered in Alberta for promotion of sports. Our mission is to create programs for youth, for ladies, for gents, for all demographics of the society, sports-based programs, so we can build healthy, physically healthy and mentally healthy communities ASAF's motto is that no kid or no one should be left behind playing sports just because of lack of resources. We have many different programs that we run pretty much around the year, but because of the COVID, we are not able to do many programs this year. But we are blessed to be part of an amazing team that is that is basically always on feet and thinking about different programs for the community. So we basically we have our founding member whose guidance is always with us, Dr. Abdul Rahman. He's the chairman, and our leader, our president, Mohammed Irfan Pasharbai, who has always motivating us, who's always come up with ideas. And then there are volunteers like me. I work as in capacity of Vice President of Sports Partnership with All Sports Alberta Foundation. And we have many clubs. We have badminton club, cricket club, ladies badminton club, hunting and archery club. If you're interested, you're more than welcome to join one of our clubs and be part of All Sports Alberta Foundation. And please like and subscribe our YouTube channel. As I said, we are also live on YouTube. We need your support on our channel as well. So like and subscribe. We are constantly working on programming for our community for different physical activities. Some housekeeping items for tonight. All mics will be muted, and we'll have a Q&A session once Naveed has done his talk, and there's a panel, as I said. Once panel has done the Q&A, you can post your comments or your questions in the chat section of Zoom, or you can also use the live chat section of YouTube to ask your questions. Both platforms are getting monitored for any questions that you have. If we will have some time, we may allow participants to also ask questions directly from Naveed, and but it will be a very controlled environment where you will have 30 seconds to ask questions, and then we can answer the question. And yeah, so we will again. It's all time constrained. Depend on time. Before I hand over to our next panelist, I would like to thank some of the individuals and some of the associations who have helped us promote this event. I would like to thank Abid Khan. He's one of the community activists, community workers. Khurram Tawheed from Friends Cafe of Canada. Mr. Ahmed Beeman from Pakistan Canada Association. Mr. Paul Khan from Pakhtun Association, and Jalal Ladakh, who runs a very popular radio program called Coffee with Jalal. Yeah, so very excited. All the community is very excited to hear from me. I am also excited. Now I will hand over to Dr. Rehan Masood, who actually discovered this gem for us. And what a find. So over to you, Dr. Masood. Let us know about your journey.
Thanks, Ishan, and thanks everybody for joining this session. And I hope this will be a source of inspiration for all of us. I also feel that in this session we will learn human resilience and what's needed for mental and physical well-being. So before asking Naveed to come and give his talk, I just wanted to share my experience, how I came to know about Naveed. So last year, as most of you know, that because of the pandemic, it was a stressful time for everybody, for being a doctor and physician. So we had different kinds of stresses and everything. So few months ago, me and my colleagues where I work, we were thinking that we need to take some time out from the stressful environment. And we were planning to do a trekking or hiking adventure somewhere in the world. And we decided to go Pakistan for that. Then before planning that trip, I started doing some internet or online search for some destinations and to find out if there is a person who can help us with the proper tracking and guidance. And that's where I came to know about Naveed. And it was a very pleasant surprise, I must say that. Surprise as well as inspiration for me. So Naveed has an amazing story. Frankly speaking, not many of us could ever do life-changing decision which Naveed was able to do actually. The ability to quit everything in your life to pursue your passion is not very easy. I think most of us know that, and it takes great mental strength to take difficult decision, and he was able to do that. To do that, I always admired people who create history by doing something which was never done before. And Naveed is one of those. He did some unique things which nobody else attempted in Pakistan. So other than the story which is already shared about him, not many people know that Naveed is masters in global disaster management. He used to work for BBC journalism team in Pakistan. He's a trained EMS and rescue staff. And above all, as you already heard, that he did two epic journeys across Pakistan. And one of that journey, he was with a person, Paul Salopek. He's a Pulitzer journalist, and Naveed walked with him from Afghan border to Wagah border, and they they have a nice stories to share actually about that. The other thing, which is, uh, if people are interested to know more about Naveed, he's featured in National Geographic travel documentary Road Trip, and there's a Pakistan episode. And there's several local Pakistani and international travel vloggers who visited northern Pakistan or Hunza, and Naveed was providing them guidance and help over there, and he's featured in many of those YouTube videos. I'm also actually anxiously actually waiting for his first book publication, and which is going to come with the name of Acid to Apricots. So I, I would be looking for that, and whenever it's ready for publication, so we will share it with everybody. Um, like Naveed, in Canada, we have a local hero, Terry Fox, who did walk across Pakistan across Canada for a cause. And there's a famous quote by Terry Fox that he said, "I want to try the impossible to show that it can be done." And I must say that Naveed was able to do that thing in Pakistan, and it's an inspiration for all of us. And without further ado, I would like to invite Naveed, Naveed Khan, CEO of Hunza on Foot, to just share his experience with all of us.
Thank you so much, Zishan and Dr. Masood. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Hello. It's 7:18 in the morning here. I've been up since 5 in the morning, anxiously waiting for this video call to start because it's been in the works for the past 2.5 weeks, I think. And I had certain travel plans, which I gladly pushed just so I could get this video out of the way. Having said that, I'm not big on public speaking. I even don't like it when the camera is pointing at me. I love pointing the camera away from me. But I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much for taking time out on your Friday nights, I'm assuming. Yeah. And let's get started. So a lot of what I was what I was going to say as an introduction, I feel like Drew Binsky and Zishan and Masood have already done for me. But just so it comes from the horse's mouth, my story sort of starts in Seattle, where I had kind of run away from home because we had just moved from Karachi to New York, and I kind of wanted to test how I would do on my own and not living living under my dad's roof. And this is when I was about 17, close to 17, and I had moved to Seattle, where I was living with my best friend from Karachi and his dad. And I had gotten a job um, somehow through a friend in a local McDonald's, where I was sweeping and mopping floors, eventually, doing dishwashing, then eventually drive through, which was worse than sweeping and mopping floors, actually. And then, that kind of led me to a night job at Denny's Diner, where I spilled my coffee on this old lady who, first time carrying hot liquids in a tray. I'm still haunted by it. And I had just spilled coffee on this old lady who was there with her husband. It was about 11 p.m. And while the manager was screaming at me and telling me to get the hell out of there, the husband recognized my name tag on my uniform shirt, which said Khan, and he asked me if I was from Pakistan, and I said yes. And he's like, well, it's kind of the manager's fault because you obviously didn't know what you were doing. They offered me a job across the street in their hotel, which was under construction, which was a Holiday Inn, which I started working literally the next day. I quit Denny's and McDonald's, and I ended up working at Holiday Inn. And I did and their condition was that I would not say no to any job that they throw at me. And so I did a little bit of construction, a little bit of painting, a little bit of getting coffee for everybody. Um, Ended up getting a job at the front office as check-ins and reservations, then eventually night security, which kind of that moment was where a lot of things changed for me, because I had then decided that I wanted that security and safety was something that I wanted to do. And about a year later, I walked into a recruiter's office in Seattle, a U.S. Marine Corps recruiter's office, and I enlisted. And the way the U.S. military works is, if you're in the West Coast, you go to California for boot camp. If you're in the East Coast, you go to Parris Island, South Carolina for boot camp. And I had heard stories that Parris Island was much tougher. And so I moved back to New York, which is where my family was, and I went into boot camp from there. I obviously drew the lucky straw because as soon as I graduated and I finished all my schooling, 9/11 happened. And because I spoke Urdu and some Pashto, I was instantly deployed um, to the war. So a lot of people ask me what led me to BBC, what led me to conflict news journalism. That's how that happened. And so eventually, back in 2011, I was offered a gig with the BBC when one of our former military generals had left the country and now was coming back, General Musharraf, and there was a lot of trouble and violence expected at that point. I was asked to go with a news team from London to Pakistan and provide some back watching. It was supposed to be a one-time gig, which turned into an offer on the table. At that point, I hadn't planned or ever imagined coming back to Pakistan unless for weddings or funerals, which is how I see a lot of Pakistanis that live overseas. They usually end up in Pakistan for a wedding or a funeral now. And that was me back then. And until I was offered that gig with the BBC, and I was fascinated by life without parents in Pakistan because it was such a different experience. It was being independent in a country that is home but hasn't been home for so long. And so I was getting to live a new life in an old place. And it kept me pretty busy because at that point, Pakistan was pretty volatile, to say the least. There was a lot of political and gang warfare happening. There was a lot of Afghan, Pakistan, American conflict at the time. So they kept me pretty busy. Um, if Pasha Bhai, could you start the batch one media? And so eventually, you know, after a long time, about 4 years of freelance and full-time BBC work, being deployed to Syria, Afghanistan, barely escaping bomb blasts. I ended up in Pakistan, and by now I was pretty depressed in a very dark mental state. These images are from the Army Public School attack, where our news team was the first to get in. Some of these images are not at the Army Public School attack. This one is a training exercise. Now, this is what our training would look like on a monthly basis. Uh, it was very close to how they would train you in the military if you were captured. And so, as a journalist, uh, this is with Lise Doucette. That was, you know, me in the military back in 2000. Now, a lot of these. Um, so what the Army Public School attack did for me was it was a trigger where I realized walking out of that auditorium, which was still smelling of blood and smoke, that I had seen enough, like I said in that video that was played earlier, that I had seen enough death and destruction for more than one lifetimes, and and by then I had lost all faith in humanity, and peace was a figment of my imagination, um, and after seeing what I saw that day with death everywhere, little children whose lives were taken senselessly, I came out of the auditorium. We spent about 2 days in Peshawar, just doing follow-up stories, covering about a dozen funerals each day. That I had sent my email, resignation email, to my boss in London, and those were probably the longest 2 months of my life where I had to serve my 2 month notice. Um, and as soon as that was up, I packed up my bags and I left Islamabad, which was home then, which is home now, right now. And I kind of just, abandoned everything from my past life. And I sold a lot of my stuff because I was quitting my job. I gave up my house. I sold a lot of my furniture. I rented a small cottage in the mountains in Hunza. And back then there was barely any tourist activity in Hunza in northern Pakistan because of the 9/11 fallout, and also because Pakistan hadn't at that point done a great job at marketing Pakistan as a destination after 9/11. And so I quit, I packed up, I moved to Hunza for about 2 months, which is when I started just exploring Hunza on my own. Started finally using Facebook for the first time. This was 2014, end of 2014. And I started posting photos of my journey, just exploring Hunza on my own with my dog. And I got a random message one day from this guy I had met during the Malala Yousafzai press conference in London. and he wanted to know if I would show his friend around Hunza, because he saw my photos and he was interested in coming to Pakistan and going to Hunza with me. And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? I'm here. I wouldn't mind. The guy came. I came down to Islamabad to meet him, took him up with me. And it wasn't until about a week later when people started coming up to him and asking him if he was who they thought he was, that I realized that he was a big deal. And then another 2 weeks later, he was leaving and he was like, Naveed, now that you've decided that you're going to start your own company and it's going to be called Hunza on Foot, I suggest you set up a page on Facebook with that name so that I can tag you. And then I want you to be ready because you're going to get a lot of emails and messages about maybe wanting to come and get that experience themselves. That was Brandon Stanton from Humans of New York, who I had taken up with me without knowing. I mean, I knew his name. I just didn't know what he did for a living. I thought he was just a photojournalist because that's what he said to me. And that was pretty much the beginning of this new life that I find myself in now. It was a random gut call of quitting my job and forcing myself to abandon my education, my professional background, the security of a monthly income, and force myself to put myself first, because my job was literally to put everybody else first. There were times when we would come under attack or threat by, let's say, Taliban, and I would have to evacuate everybody out of Pakistan or Afghanistan except myself. And so when Dr. Rehan approached me about this talk, and the gist of it was mental and physical well-being, I instantly related to it because I've worked as an EMS in New York. I was part of a rescue operation right after 9/11, even though I was still in the Marines at the time. And I feel like that's one thing I can say I have in common with a lot of you, in the medical field, although I'm not a doctor, but we've all put ourselves first. We've all surrounded ourselves with scenes that are very hard to forget or recover from. And we kind of carry them with us. Even when we are not thinking about them, we carry them with us. And so that was the point where I instantly said, I'd love to be a part of this talk, because it wasn't until I left all of that behind and forced myself to take a personal leave of absence. And even if I was going to go broke and poor, that it was high time that I took care of myself to maybe come back from that one day and get back to doing what I used to do, but with a fresh outlook, with more hope and more positivity. Except that I had no idea that I would never go back to that. And I can only speak for myself. I'm extremely happy that I haven't gone back to that. So that was the beginning. And then Hunza on Foot started, and Brandon was right. As soon as he put up a story about me, about how I helped him go through the mountains of Pakistan, I literally got thousands of emails and Facebook messages about people wanting to come. And a lot of them were Pakistani Brits or Pakistani Americans or Pakistani Canadians that have never been to Pakistan before. But because they followed Brandon and they finally saw Pakistan, parts of Pakistan that, to be honest, not many Pakistanis knew about back then, at least. They were shocked, they were surprised, they wanted to come and experience that themselves. And that's how, Hunza on Foot started as a tour company. Initially, my idea was to have Hunza on Foot as a blog where I put information online and I just help people, self-plan their journeys and go and, you know, have their own little mini adventures. But although that page is still on my website, the self-planning page is still on there. I started getting more and more requests for me to lead tours to the Pakistani North. Excuse me. And so I did. And then, you know, I'm the kind of guy, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate. I get bored very easily. I always need to do more. I need to constantly seek inspiration, or push myself every time I start getting comfortable. Hunza on Foot became a job eventually, and then it wasn't fun anymore. It was a job. It was okay, marketing, bookings, travel, itineraries, troubleshooting. And so again, 2 years later, I find myself in a place where, okay, so now I'm making money again. I'm making better money than I was making at BBC, so I'm okay with that now. But I feel like I'm not enjoying being in the mountains anymore because now the only reason I'm in the mountains is to make money. And so, like that video suggested, I was sitting around Islamabad at home. I was talking to a friend who told me about a guy named Paul Selapek who had started walking from Ethiopia back in 2013. And he was now somewhere in the Tajikistan area. and I started following his journey, and I was so inspired. Not because it was a physical challenge, but because of all the experiences he was writing about, all of the daily experiences that he was sharing. And that kind of took me back to my days with the BBC when I remembered at that point, I remembered how my job was primarily to say no to all of the news anchors that would come to me with a risk assessment form and say, Naveed, there's a story, it's high risk, and we want to do it. Here's our risk assessment form. And then it was my job to figure out if the story was worth the risk. And, 7 times out of 10, it was. And 3 times out of 10, it wasn't. But these assessments were all based off of markings on a map, red marks and orange markings on a map that I obviously did not know anything firsthand about. These were maps handed to me from security analysts, and a lot of them didn't know what they were marking because they were relying on news reports. And so that knowing that I had no idea what my country really was about, and how I looked at Pakistan as a map with a lot of orange and red markings, uh, by which they mean, no-go areas or not safe for travel areas. I decided that it was time for me to make my own assessment, and the only way I was gonna do it was by walking. That came from the inspiration, Paul Selapek's journey. And so, like most things now in my life, if they're challenging, and if I've been thinking about them for more than a few months, they don't become a reality until I post them on my Instagram. As soon as I post them on my Instagram, I have to do it because now it's public. And so one day I just, woke up in the morning, made myself some coffee, and I put up a little thing on my Instagram saying I'm going to walk from the China border to Karachi coast. And I put a start date and date, which meant that I set myself a target date, which I later realized was very overambitious of me, because I gave myself only 3 months to walk about 3,600 kilometers through terrain that I had no idea how it was going to be, or where I was going to sleep, or where I was going to, find food. But if you can go to the Pasha, if you could go to the media files. Batch one. We're still actually batch two. We're on batch two. So you saw in the video how the biggest challenge was never physical, because you can, if you listen to your body, you can slow down or speed up, or walk less or walk more. The biggest challenge for me was being alone for so long, and unless these random encounters where you would run into people who were curious to know where you were going and why you were walking, because walking is so not normal these days. And so that video did not play. um, but walking for me was, or being alone was the biggest challenge, primarily because when I left BBC, and when I tried to leave all that trauma behind, I immediately distracted myself with traveling and sightseeing, and then starting Hunza on foot. So so that trauma was never addressed. Like, I never spent long enough being alone to actually think about what I had just been through the past, 14 years of my life. And it wasn't until I started walking when I realized that I was holding on to a lot of very dark, very troubling stuff in my head. And the longer I spent alone, the harder it got, where I now had nobody to talk to. I had no phone network to distract myself with online posts and, Instagram and Facebook. And that is when I realized um, everything that was going on with me personally. And I think that was the most beautiful thing that came out of the walk. A lot of people, when they hear about the walk, or they see a video of the walk, they think that it was a physical, challenge. It was some record breaking adventure that I undertook. But for me, the coolest thing to come out of that journey was tapping into my brain, and realizing that there was an issue, that issue needed to be addressed immediately for me to, you know um, find hope in relationships, personal or business, or become a better father, become a better friend, become a better colleague. And it wasn't until I started listening to myself, because I had nobody else to listen to or talk to, uh, when I realized that I needed help, I needed therapy. Um, and the months, after the walk ended, when I came back to Islamabad, and between dinners and talks, there were therapy sessions almost daily, where I don't think I've cried so much. And I don't think I've ever felt so good after crying. And that's when I realized that, you know, it was probably the best thing to ever happen to me was to just let it all out. And that was the change that came out of the walk. Um, other than the fact that I finally drew my own circles around the map. And one of the coolest things, and some of the questions that a lot of the people ask me about the walk or about my journey is how safe it is to travel across Pakistan. It's and after living in the US and Italy and Iran for a few years, I feel like it's probably the safest country I've ever lived in, aside from the random incidents that happen anywhere in the world. Um, for me, the parts of Pakistan that were red took care of me the most. They would not let me sleep on the side of the road. They would not let me pitch a tent. They actually delayed my walk. They actually kidnapped me to attend family weddings, and this was the only time I've been kidnapped was to attend a wedding. They tortured me with repeated cups of tea. You know, I must have had 1,000 cups of tea. That was eventually torture. But just amazing, lovely people, and that's kind of when I started just hating myself for all those risk assessments that I had done. You know, all those assumptions I had made because I had seen a news analysis or a security analysis saying that this place is completely no go because something happened close to it 10 years ago. And it was a one time incident, you know, and to just completely write off that area as a dangerous, terror infested place is just so unfair to Pakistan, because Pakistan is, if you Google after this talk, if you just Google security map Pakistan, you will know what I mean. There are so many red marks on Pakistan. And so, one of the best things that came out of walking was my mental well being. And the other great thing that came out of it was I fell madly in love with Pakistan. I fell madly in love with the people of Pakistan, mostly just the common people of Pakistan, who went out of their ways to look out for me. There are some images in batch 2, if you can play, of people that I met, just small random incidents. If you could play the batch 2 again, but this time maybe just slow down a little. This is not. This is actually this is batch 3. I don't know why it's so. If you go on the solo walk, so if you play the solo walk images. I was going to read chapter 1 from the book I'm writing, but I didn't want to be very dark and depressing on this talk. But it is on my website if anybody wants to read it. So you can go next image. This is when I first realized the importance of writing. I started journaling my walk every day. Because I couldn't talk to anybody. This is that night in the graveyard that I was talking in the video. So if you can pause on this image and don't move it. So the guy that's to my right in the blue shalwar kameez. So this was about day 4, day 5 of my solo walk. Um, and this was the first like human interaction I had after I started my walk. And this is a construction site back in 2016. They had just started laying, um, high-speed fiber lines for comms across the China-Pakistan economic corridor. And so these guys saw me walking, and when you're walking, everything slows down, and so you get to observe everything for much longer, much clearer. And then they obviously had that same experience. They could see me coming for miles, and when I finally got right in front of them, this guy in the blue asked me to join them for a cup of tea. And then they started asking me what I was doing, where I was going, why was I walking, all the regular questions that I was asked pretty much the rest of the time walking. And as soon as this guy found out that I was walking all the way to Karachi and I still had about 3 months to go, he basically just quit his job, told his boss that he's quitting his job, and because I'm too naive and I think that I'm going to be safe for the next 3 months walking across Pakistan, that he feels it's his responsibility to walk with me for 3 months, and to take care of me. And I literally had to force him to keep his job because he was serious. He packed up his bag right in front of me. He was serious, and I had to force him to a keep his job and b let me carry on walking alone because it was intentional and that was something I had to do. But before I left that construction site, he gave me his brother's number and he put me on the phone with him and said, when you're crossing Kohistan, you have to call my brother and go and stay at my house. And when I was talking about all the red marks on the map, Kohistan was the reddest of them all, because a couple of years ago, there was a major incident where certain people from a certain religious class had stopped a bus that was full of another religious sect, and they had killed all of them. And since that one incident, that area, that entire region, had been crossed off as a no-go area. And that area is where all of these guys are from. Kohistan is also known for the hardest working construction labor you will ever find in Pakistan. And so all of these men are from Kohistan. And when I finally arrived in Kohistan about a month later, that's where I was kidnapped for about a week of weddings and tea. You can move on to the next image if there is one. So again, just these are places where I slept. My backpack, I finally realized the importance of not carrying so much weight on my back. This backpack was later gifted to some random person who hosted me, and instead I took his small backpack and only put in about 2 clothing items that I actually used, as opposed to everything that I did not use that was in the bag at that point. Um, I feel like this is not supposed to be played right now. Yeah. So one of the other things that I learned after the walk, which I don't think I could have learned had I not done this journey, was the importance of carrying very little on you, whether it's physical, load that I now have to carry as part of my job, or just the amount of baggage you carry in your personal life. Because I started realizing that I was holding on to so much unnecessary burden, and I was weighing myself down more than anything else. Um, and so in a lot of ways, this walk was very spiritual. It made me very spiritual. It forced me to think of things in a deeper way. A lot of people that I met during the walk, there was a Sufi singer that I met in Lahore in the walled city. There's a famous mosque there uh, called the Wazir Khan Mosque, and I met this because I was sleeping at the Wazir Khan Mosque that night, and I met this really spiritual guy there that night. And we started talking, and I was talking to him about the journey, and he made me realize the importance of just holding on to the things that matter the most at that point and letting go of the things that don't, or that haven't mattered to me for a long time. They were just unnecessary burdens. And and so yeah, that was the solo walk. I eventually did reach my target. I had to start walking 50 kilometers a day instead of the 35 kilometers that I had initially planned to walk. And the 50 kilometers were broken into two parts. One, because I also started walking the Sindh Highway, which was really hot even in December. I'd have to walk about 25 kilometers in the morning, early morning, starting at about 5 a.m. And by 9 a.m., it was already too hot. And so I would find shelter, wait it out, and then start walking 25 kilometers at about 4:30 p.m. and then be done with it by about 7 p.m. And eventually I got to Karachi safely in one piece, which was a great ending to my journey because a lot of people joined me on and off throughout the walk. Um, People that were following my Instagram and Facebook journey, um, they they knew where I was coming next, and so a lot of people were waiting in Karachi, which was a big surprise, which was probably the highlight of my entire walk. Also, because by then I was just sick of walking, uh, that I needed that extra push from the community. Um, and I had this girl, this 16-year-old girl, join me for an entire day of walking, which is about, which at that point was about 30 kilometers left. That was my last day. Distance was 30 kilometers. The 16-year-old girl joined me with her mom, who was about 58. And and yeah, a lot of family and friends came out, random people that met me in Hunza 3 months ago when I first started my walk, but they were from Karachi and they promised me that they were going to be there for me at the finish line. And I remember, I don't know if any one of you is from Karachi, but Karachi has this tradition that every New Year's Eve, there's a place called Seaview, which was my end line. The police comes and completely blocks it off with these huge shipping containers. And I remember walking down this long road, and maybe a kilometer before the end line, the police had started installing all these shipping containers. And one of the guys got on, like he hitched a ride. He stopped this guy in a car and he sped to the police. And he's like, you're not blocking this road until this guy crosses it, because he's been walking for 3 months. And that was the end. There was no dropping to my knees and crying and kissing the earth under me. I literally just reached my end line. It was New Year's Eve. My friends had organized a big party for me. I literally finished the walk, went to my friend's house, showered, changed, and partied. Um, and then about a week later, I was back in Islamabad, and I realized that I no longer belonged in Islamabad. I realized that everyone I knew was from my old life. Everyone I knew in Islamabad was either a diplomat or a journalist, and they knew me from before this journey. Um, and that was the first time I realized how much I had changed, how I started enjoying the company of the common people so much more um, than the company of even like old friends. Um, and then that kind of had its own impact on me. I once again found myself in a very weird place where I would turn down social events, even if they were for me, if they were planned for me, because I felt like a lot of them could not relate to what I had to say. Um, and then right when that was happening, I guess it was perfect timing because the reason I walked, the inspiration behind my walk, Paul Selopek, um, and you know, with the digital world, there's only maybe 1 degree of separation now. He found out about my walk, and this is when he was planning on his entry into Pakistan, and he reached out to me. Um, I think 2 months into, like 2 months after I finished my walk, I got an email from Paul Selopek asking me if I would be willing to walk a second time, this time with him, and this time I'd be paid for it. By the way, walking is probably one of the most expensive things you could do. I literally ran out of almost all of my savings just walking. Um, so yeah, if you're ever planning on walking long distances, it's an expensive thing to do. Um, and so yeah, I needed the money, but also more than that, here's my chance to walk with someone who I looked up to, a two-time Pulitzer-winning war reporter, you know, walking the earth, retracing the ancient migration from Ethiopia to Chile in South America, reached out to me. I immediately said yes. And a couple of months later, I was walking again, but this time from the high border of Wakhan corridor, which is what connects Pakistan to China, Tajikistan, and Afghanistan. It's a nomadic corridor all the way to the Wagah border. But this walk was completely different because this was a storytelling mission. Paul's mission was very different than mine because his mission was about retracing the ancient migration, but telling stories of people who had settled there eventually. And so for me to walk with him almost on the same trail that I had walked alone was even more fascinating, but because this time I was not just walking very fast to reach a target, but I was walking and I didn't think at that point, I didn't think I could slow down anymore. I thought walking itself was slow enough until I started walking with Paul because every time we saw an interesting character, we stopped. And sometimes we stopped after only walking 5 kilometers and we stopped for 5 days. Um, and so life at that point really slowed down. Whereas I now not only knew the places really well, but I was now beginning to really get to know people of those places and their history and their stories and their, you know, their drama and their, you know, love. And it was fascinating. And so if you can play the Out of Eden walk video that I shared, these are some of the stories. If you want to see more of our stories from Pakistan, just go on Out of Eden walk.
My name is Paul Salopek, and I'm a journalist and National Geographic Fellow. And I'm walking through the world in the pathways of the first ancestors who discovered the world back in the Stone Age. for a project called the Out of Eden Walk. We're standing in a fortress along the Silk Road called Ganesh.
You can also play the second one, the second video. Okay, so that video, I don't know if you guys were able to see it smooth. I wasn't. So I'm guessing that it was difficult to follow, but so that was a family of gold. You know, locally they're called gold panners. They dig for gold on the river Indus. And the reason I wanted to share that video over a lot of other videos was that these are people that I had seen on my walk in different parts of the country. I had seen people digging next to the river. And I always just saw them and I carried on. I just always assumed that they were construction crew doing whatever labor, never cared to find out more. But when I was walking with Paul, and because it was a storytelling mission, we actually stopped and went off trail across the river to meet with these guys. And turns out that for generations, their families have been digging for gold along the river Indus. And if you go on Out of Eden Walk on nationalgeographic.com, and just go through the Pakistan stories, you can actually see the entire story that was published on these guys. That day that we spent with them, we actually we stopped walking for about a day and a half just to document their stories. These guys pulled out gold worth about $700 in one day, but the process of them actually separating gold from all the debris requires them to burn mercury. Sorry, I drew a blank there. They, at the end of the process, when they're left with very little residue and a lot of debris, they burn mercury so that it brings all the gold together. And so for decades, they've been exposed to mercury, but they have no idea what mercury poisoning is. So when we met them, we instantly felt, both Paul and I felt like they weren't quite there. Like in the head, they weren't there. Like they were just zoned out, like they were on drugs. But for decades, they've been exposing themselves to mercury. And all the gold that they find, and like I said, they pulled $700 worth of gold right in front of us in one day. And they're at it every day. They don't take weekends off. They dig for gold every day. They supply a very large market of Gilgit-Baltistan with gold. but when you look at them and when you interact with them, they they don't even know how to use that money. Their kids are poorly dressed. They don't go to school. The kids also help the parents with the process, so the kids are exposed as well. And then Paul tells me, because long time ago, when Paul was a young man, before he became a journalist, an investigative journalist, he used to he used to dig for gold in Mexico. And so that's when he recognized something across the river, and he said, Naveed, I think they're digging for gold, because I see that device that they're using looks really familiar to me. And so we walked across the river, and once we realized that that's exactly what they were doing, there was a story to be told. But had it not been for that storytelling mission, I would have walked right by them for the 12th time without ever knowing who these people were, or what they were going through, or what they were putting themselves through. And so that walk with Paul Selopek then opened me up to a whole new uh, series of mini adventures, and it became I started to then care more about the people I was meeting, and take more time to really get to know my hosts, and instead of staying in hotels, I now make it a point for all of Hunza on Foot tours. Now, after the walk with Paul Selopek, all of my tours now have at least one overnight with a local family, where the local family becomes the host of the group, and I take a back seat, and I let the local host basically take my group through a very different journey of history and culture and music and food. And I feel like when people sign up with Hunza on Foot, because I don't promise any commercial sightseeing type of tours. Almost all of my tours are very off the beaten path. Um, and I feel like that has now become a signature trademark of Hunza on Foot, is if you want to take a couple of selfies, we're not the right people. But if you really want to go, get away from the Karakoram highway and into the valleys, and meet with the nomads, the nomad shepherds of that land, who started that land, and learn from their grandfathers, guys that are 110 years old, still alive. They'll still carry about 40 kilos on their backs. And when they start telling you about the first time they left their valley, which is probably when a lot of us were already traveling on an airplane, is when they first left their piece of the mountain in a Jeep on a very bad road for the first time, and they saw electricity for the first time. And this guy started crying because he said, the first time I saw electricity, which by the way was in 89, I was already 12 years old. He started crying because he thought all the houses were on fire. And so that's how innocent these people are, and that's how long it took them to somewhat come out into the world. And so my job with Hunza on Foot has very naturally evolved into not just bringing people to the mountains, but sending a piece of the mountains with them when they leave. Um, and I feel like the only way to do that is to really detach from 5-star hotels and the luxuries of driving around in a car the whole time, and to experience the journey on foot, even if it's for a few hours of day hikes, to feel what it's like to have to carry your own weight, to then understand how important it is for you to prioritize what all you carry, and then to take a journey. It's like a mini pilgrimage for me. It's very the whole experience is extremely religious. The it's like a ritual now. The packing, the weighing of the pack, taking things out and just discarding them because I feel like it's unnecessary. You know, understanding what shoes will work the best in on what terrain, and then charting my journey, packing my food, rationing everything, and then slowly just allowing myself to go with the flow, uh, following at many times following nothing but goat shit across to find a trail, because you get lost. Because I don't know if a lot of you know, but the Karakoram range is the youngest mountain range, and so it's always changing. No trail is ever the same after about a year, and so a lot of times I get lost on a trail, and I'm a guide. But I feel like a lot of the people that I take, um, our best experience together is that journey on foot, and then leaving all of our hotels and hot water and bathrooms and really great food behind for at least a day to live with the locals, even if for a few hours. I usually encourage an overnight, um, but just even for a couple of hours to be in their homes, very small shepherd huts that just kind of blow your mind, because their lives stop as soon as you enter their homes, and you feel so loved, and by the time you're leaving you feel like you're part of their family, which, to be honest, sadly you don't feel that way with folks in the city, because everybody is so busy, everybody has their own priorities. And that's kind of the drug of the mountain for me, is that lifestyle is the drug. um, so yeah, I think it's 8:17 now. We've got a little bit of ground left to cover. Um, wrapping this up. Um, all of the work aside, um, I have been I have committed to Paul Selopek to walk once again with him. Once he reaches Siberia, I want to walk across Siberia with him, which probably will take about 2 years from now to start the walk across Siberia. He's currently waiting for his Chinese visa in Burma. Um, it will take him approximately 2 years to cross China on foot. And so as soon as he's ending his the China leg, I'm going to then hopefully join him, and walk across Siberia with him. And then a lot of us that have walked with him in different countries have all been asked by National Geographic to walk Paul Selopek to the finishing line in Tierra del Fuego in Chile. And so that, I think, is another 5 years from now, 4 or 5 years from now. I'll hopefully be walking into Tierra del Fuego in Chile. But so to wrap this up, all the work aside, writing the book aside, one of the things that's dearest to me, that's closest to my heart, as of 2 years ago, is when I first slept in a shepherd hut that I was just talking about, I realized no matter where I go, and I've seen these in Peru as well when I hiked across Peru long time ago. This has nothing to do with Hunza on foot, um, but wherever I travel to, and as long as they're in shepherd territories, there are these shepherd huts that are basically designed as overnight emergency shelters, and then also for storage during the winter months. And I realized that there's there's thousands of shepherd huts in beautiful remote parts of the country that are just going to waste. And because I take a lot of my groups to off the beaten path sort of locations that are usually um, that usually these shepherd huts exist in, I came up with an idea to instead of only being able to camp in these places, to take these at least some of these shepherd huts and convert them into off-grid, bed and breakfasts. Um, and so this idea started when I was walking and when I had to sleep alone in a shepherd hut because it was pouring down rain, it was freezing cold. And I remember that night I was the photo you saw with me, like the silhouette of me writing, that was my first time inside a shepherd hut. And that night I was sleeping there. So that is so I later then decided that I want to do a call to action on my Instagram. I asked for donations and for volunteers. And within 3 days, I raised enough money to assemble this team of volunteers that were half community members of that area. So the guy in the cowboy hat, he owned the land where the shepherd hut was built on. The guy you see in the background in the center, he's a carpenter who volunteered from Karachi, uh, who traveled all the way to Islamabad, then took a bus all the way to the north, carried his own carpentry equipment, woodwork equipment across a glacier with us. Um, and within 5 days, we renovated the shepherd hut. Here you can see him using, reclaimed juniper tree and converting that into a beautiful dining table that ended up becoming the centerpiece. These are some of the volunteers that came um, and helped us. They came from all over. So this is what it looks like from the inside. Almost everything you see inside is donated. Um, Carpets, weatherproof paint. This is the table that you saw Changez carving out earlier. All of the bowls, all of the cutlery was donated by a small business in Islamabad called Clayworks. And so this place became the only place in that entire region, well, the entire country really, to offer a place. So these images are these are some of the art pieces. These are two photos fused together on canvas. These are two of the images I sell to raise money. Over here you see the Bashahi Mosque, but with the silhouette of the Karakoram Mountains in the background. These are some of the works I sell to raise money for the shepherd huts. And so after this pilot, I kind of had to put the brakes on because last year I started producing a travel show for Disney Plus and National Geographic called Rogue Trip, which I guess we can even put the link on in the chat box if anybody wants to see it. You have to be subscribed to Disney. Um, and so all of last year, I was busy with that production, so I could not build any more. Plus, then COVID started. And so this year, the plan is to install at least 2 more shepherd huts, but this time on the trail to the K2 base camp, because unlike the Everest base camp, K2 base camp, it's much more rugged and remote. There are no tea houses, unlike Everest base camp. And a lot of people, if they get sick, they have no ways of getting immediate help or first care. There's no first care. And so the idea is to install 2 more shepherd huts this year by June 15th, because that's when the K2 base camp expeditions start up again. And so here's my little plea for assistance. If any of you would like to learn more about this, you can just go on hunzaonfoot.com. There's a page dedicated to the Shepherd's Inn. You'll find a lot of information on that page. You can write to me if you need more information. We're trying to set up a GoFundMe account soon. Pakistan doesn't have access to a lot of these crowdfunding resources. So somebody that I trust in the US is helping me set it up. But yeah, so far for the K2 base camp shepherd huts, we've raised about $3,000. The target is $14,000 because it is so remote that you literally have to have an army of humans and yaks to carry these building all of this equipment across the glaciers. It's about a 5-day journey on foot to get to the site where this is going to be built. So it's an uphill challenge, but the only type of challenges we love. And so if anybody wants to help, either by volunteering their time or their expertise, or by donating funds, please let me know. Please let one of the panelists know. With that, I think I'm going to end my talk and then hand it back to you for questions and answers.
Okay, before we go over to, I think, Dr. Asim or Zishan, I'll run this video. I think I missed that one. Made in Pakistan.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, it's taking a little longer. Okay, I think I'll try to run it later, a little later. We can go to Zishan or Dr. Asim.
Hey, thank you so much, Naveed. What an inspiring journey from McDonald's all the way up into the mountains to Karachi, having a travel from a legend from one part of Pakistan to another. Thank you so much, Naveed, for giving us your version of the story, and it's always nice to hear it from the person who's gone through the experiences. Um, we have a few questions which we were wondering if you wouldn't mind answering, and I'm sure a lot of people who are going through this talk first need to have an impression. When we talk about 5,100 kilometers, that's actually a journey all the way from Vancouver to Toronto and beyond. The kilometers actually by walk from Vancouver to Toronto is 4,500. And Naveed, mashallah, has done 55,000 plus kilometers. So kudos to you, and thank you so much. I have a few questions in mind, Naveed, and I'm sure these will be very relevant to a lot of viewers who are watching you right now. And as All Sports Alberta Foundation is dedicated to activities of healthy lifestyle, some of these questions will be targeting around these activities and the safety of Pakistan as well. So between me and Zishan, we're going to keep flipping the questions if that's okay with you. Um, and I'll start off with the first question, which is travel safety in Pakistan. If I'm coming there for the first time, what arrangements do I need for a trip to Hunza and beyond?
Yeah, that's. I'm going to go back to my earlier points about those red markings on the map. It's it's one of the safest places I've ever traveled or lived in. The only safety one should be thinking of and planning for is road safety, medical safety, because a lot of these places are remote. You don't have access to healthcare as much as in the cities. So people that are coming to Hunza should be more concerned with, things like inclement weather. You should look into what time of the year you're traveling, what the weather is going to be like, how to, what type of altitude you're getting to. So altitude sickness is a common thing. Bad weather, mountains make their own weather. It's a famous saying, and it couldn't be more true. The forecast might say sunny and butterflies, and when you get there, it's pouring down rain. And in June, I've seen snow. You know, so and then risks of rock slides and landslides is sometimes pretty common right after rain. And so these are the things that people should be more concerned with than, let's say, a terror attack or just common criminality, which I've never seen in Hunza or Baltistan. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. That's basically what the image is portrayed in front of us, that it's the terrorism which kind of sparks fear in all of us rather than the other things that you just mentioned. This takes me to the second question, Naveed. If I have an organization or a school or some sort of an academy where I want to run a trip to Pakistan and go to the northern sites, what how Hunza on foot can collaborate or can help us guide through making it easy trip.
So one of the things that I try very hard not to do is bring a very large footprint in the mountains with me. Um, Having said that, I've done a couple of big groups for charity fundraisers, never from Canada or the US, but I've done a few now with the United Kingdom, Pakistani, British NGOs that spend money in Pakistani healthcare and education. They bring groups of people from the UK on these hiking challenges, and for every kilometer they hike, they raise an X amount of money. I've also worked with a couple of corporations, multinational corporations in Pakistan, on leadership retreats or personal, like, sort of wellness retreats. I also work with one of the leading yoga and wellness instructors of Pakistan. And so together we've come up with this really cool yoga hiking adventure where we spend half day hiking to a beautifully disconnected place where my partner now, my professional partner now, she would run a meditation session. So yeah, so to answer your question, if there is an organization that wants to come, just write to me. You won't ever see an itinerary for groups more than 8 people, because I like to keep a very small footprint. But for customized retreats, if it's a one-off or two retreats, just write to me, just send me an email, and I can customize something for you guys.
Cool, awesome. Thanks, Naveed. So I have a question. You just mentioned about the weather, and who would know better weather here? We're in Calgary. We're surrounded by mountains, and we have seen snow in June. We have seen, blazing sun and a storm. Nonetheless, so what time of the year would you think from your travels is a good time for an average, let's say, Canadian or a person living in West to visit these parts of Pakistan?
If you're looking for a very colorful experience with weather that is bearable when you're hiking, then I would say either spring or fall. Those are my two favorite times of the year, being in the mountains, are spring and fall. Because when a lot of people have obviously more time with families and school during the summertime. And so sometimes you have no other choice but to use that break for your travel. But summer is also extremely crowded in the mountains now because it's become so popular as a destination. But summertime is also much tougher if you want to come for actual hiking as opposed to sightseeing in a car, in an air-conditioned car. Summertime is much tougher.
As you said, taking a selfie.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So what are the temperatures like during that time, during, like, say, spring or fall? Is it too cold? Is it bearable? Because summer, I think, even though you're in the mountains, it still can get pretty warm in Pakistan.
The summertime in Pakistan, no matter how, like, the higher you go, it actually gets much hotter.
Right.
And hiking becomes a big challenge. I've had people had heat strokes on day one because you're also carrying a pack, and it's not like a walk in the park. You're actually gaining altitude. You're burning, energy every second. But spring and fall, I mean, daytime temperatures are very bearable. Maybe in like mid to low 20s, and then nighttime temperatures will go down, like depending on how high you are, anywhere between 11 or 12 to maybe, let's say, -2, -3. But that's again, like, depending on the altitude you're at.
Right. Okay, that's cool. And one more thing that is my next question too. I was reading your bio and I was on Homes on Foot. So Shepherd's Inn is definitely, it's struck a chord with me too, that you're trying to build these Shepherd's Inn places for the nomad Sherpas, and also there's an element of, so they can rent it to tourists and they can generate their own income. So how do you think that it is going to enhance the hiking activities within the region? And if you could also touch on the earning stream that you're generating for the locals.
So right now, because I only have one set of huts to go off of, I can only base my earning projections off of that. Just by installing the shepherd huts that you just saw, it has already increased the adventure traffic in that region by about, I'd say 80%. Because the thing you have to understand about Pakistan is people that have never lived overseas or been exposed to that sort of a life are not big into the outdoors. Pakistanis are still not, big hikers or trekkers. They still prefer to travel in a car and just sightsee and then go and check into a hotel. And so my biggest client base are non-Pakistanis or Pakistanis that come from overseas that love the mountains or love the outdoors. But it helps having these shepherd huts. Uh, what I saw, the change that I saw was more Pakistanis that were always afraid of hiking beyond a certain distance because they could no longer turn around and come back, get in the car, go back to a hotel. They started coming for the first time because now they knew that they didn't have to sleep in a tent because that is what they were scared of. It
Right.
wasn't the hiking. They were scared of sleeping in a tent. They were scared of being extremely cold and wet. They were also, a lot of Pakistanis were also very afraid of, where they're gonna use the bathroom, so the shepherd huts gave them, shelter from the elements, from the temperatures. The shepherd huts come with very comfortable bedding. They can accommodate up to 8 people at a time.
Oh,
The revenue that they generate is, last year, which I wasn't able to use the shepherd hut at all. The year before that was the first year that we actually rented the shepherd huts, and the nightly rental for the shepherd huts was $20 a night per person. And the thing is, when you get there, because it takes you 2 days just to get there, there's no way you're turning around and coming back the next day. So when you go there, you're spending at least 2 nights there or 3 nights. And so that's about 40 to $60 per person times 8 or 10 people. And that's coming from a place that used to be used to store grass and wheat, and never earned a single rupee since they were made. So to turn a place into, a luxurious solar powered comfortable bed and breakfast where now you can sleep, you can charge your devices. All of a sudden, there's electricity, there's a gas stove where you can immediately cook or boil water. It's a big luxury in a place that never knew luxury. And so it allows for more people to, go out of their comfort zones and try nature for the first time. And plus, 50% of everything that's earned goes straight back to the community because the land is not leased by me or by Hunza on Foot. The land remains the property of the community, which is why it's really important for me to have the support of the community from day one. And so I encourage them to come with me for the entire process. They're there from day one. And then once it's up and running, it's their responsibility to keep it safe so that they can make money from rentals, you know.
exactly. That's one of the things that I read, and I was like, this is like we go to these places, but I've never heard anyone thinking about generating a revenue stream for the locals. So which is definitely amazing. Yeah. I think I have one more question, and I think I want to touch. I think it's more of a westernized topic, but I think since you are in the mountains and you look at those, sites, um, and you also mentioned on your website that you're an eco-friendly, tour company. So would you touch on that, like when you say eco-friendly, and what is the ecology and how it's changing in those regions?
I mean, the biggest problem, unlike many parts of the world that are famous for their mountains, and what I'm about to say, Nepal would be the perfect example because um, Pakistan is so underdeveloped. Um, and for me, it's a great thing that Pakistan is underdeveloped, the mountains at least. But on the other hand, the fame that it has suddenly received, and the amount of people that have started coming to Pakistani mountains, um, has started causing, a negative impact on the environment, because you're looking at a place that is not yet developed, at least with the infrastructure to sustain that amount of foot traffic, or the carbon footprint that people are leaving behind, which is why I try very hard to make sure that my groups are small, that we don't drive around in cars most of the time, that we, use the cars to do a transfer, and then, we spend as much time as possible on foot. And so all of these things are to encourage, while you're exploring the Pakistani mountains, to do it in an environmentally friendly way. Nobody is allowed to bring any plastic water bottles. Hunza on Foot has a travel kit that we give out to each participant, which includes a branded, very nice looking reusable water bottle. We have a very lightweight coffee thermos. We have, reusable, recycled tote bags that people can carry their stuff in. So they're not allowed to bring anything that's a one-time plastic, or single-use plastic is not allowed. Yeah, I mean, these are just some of, I could go on this topic for a long time. We also encourage, people to, when they come there, to kind of contribute in some way, even if it's nothing financial, just in some way contribute to the locals, whether it's by bringing used winter clothes that they no longer need, or books on wildlife. I work with the WWF, the World Wildlife Fund in Pakistan. I'm their goodwill ambassador for the northern areas, and so I do a lot of donation fundraising, as well as just book drives on wildlife, on the environment, that kind of stuff.
No, that's amazing. No, and good to know that at least someone is thinking about doing it responsibly, like doing tours, and doing taking people to, maybe, let's say, as we have been calling it, like unseen Pakistan, because again, you cannot see this stuff in cars. You have to go on foot, but you're being responsible. That's amazing, and thinking about the environment. So yeah, no, that's really inspiring. Again, that making sure that we're doing things responsibly.
Well,
I think, sorry, go ahead.
I do it for selfish reasons as well, because this is like my playground now. This is my product,
Right.
and I would like it to be that way for much longer, for as long as possible, so that these lands can be continued to be enjoyed. So yeah.
No, sure. Yeah, sure. Uh, Dr. Asim, over to you. I think maybe we can see if there are any questions from the participants.
I see that there was one question from someone that, what was the route that you planned when you did your first walk? How did you plan that route? Was it something that you decided looking at a map, or was it just you just took to the road and then just let the road follow you all the way to Karachi?
Well, I mean, it was easy for me by then, because by then I had already been running Hunza on Foot for almost 2 years. And so I had traveled that route many times by then, but in a car mostly. So I knew the geography. The hardest part for me was to decide where to go off the road, off the highway, because when you're walking or running long distance, um, it really matters like what surface you're walking or running on. And so for me, it was really important to go off the highway as much as possible. Uh, this was probably one of my favorite days walking because an entire school called a day off, and they came and met me at this point, and they walked with me for about 22 kilometers.
Wow.
Uh, and all these little kids basically just yeah. But yeah, so walking on that surface right there uh, is not ideal. Was not ideal for me. I also developed a lot of ankle and knee issues after my first walk. And so the hardest part of planning the route was where I could go off the highway. And if the trails, a lot of times I would see a trail that's Paul with Athena. Athena is my longtime companion. She's done almost all of the walks and treks with me. Um, and so, yeah, to answer the question, it was much easier to plan the overall route from the China border. There's just one road, the Old Silk Road, which is now the Karakoram Highway, down to the Grand Trunk Road, which then connects you to the Sindh Highway. It's all pretty straightforward. It's just finding the right trails to get off the road, because once you get down to the cities, then your biggest enemy is our people and cars, because they're always in a rush. That was actually the biggest threat I had on my walk, was being run over by cars.
Especially if you're from Karachi, that
Yeah.
So,
Sorry to
oh,
interrupt you.
so what was language a barrier throughout the whole trip? Because what I've heard just from Punjab province alone, as you're going from one end of Punjab to the other end of Punjab, the dialect of the local language changes at least 100 times. So you walking from one part of Pakistan, crossing majority of the provinces with multiple dialects of different languages being spoken, how did you connect with the local people?
There were a few incidents where I did not understand a word they said, um, but at the same time I understood everything they said, just because I knew what their intentions were, or I knew what they were trying. It was more about body language and gestures at some points, but I'd say 90% of the time Urdu was spoken, even if very basic Urdu, it was spoken. And so the only places where I had this issue was Kohistan, that place I was telling you about, where the construction crew was from. And then one part of Sindh, right at the beginning. Other than that, I hardly ever had that problem. Like, everybody spoke Urdu, at least basic Urdu, uh, for us to understand each other. So it wasn't alien. And I speak very good Urdu, and I understand Pashto somewhat. So yeah, there were parts of the walk where I had to walk through KP, which is predominantly Pashto speaking. And so as long as I could understand what they were saying, it was okay, because usually they did all the talking. Um, Punjabi, like the Punjab section of my walk, um, was kind of tough because I don't really speak that much Punjabi, but I've spent enough time with BBC in Punjab in Lahore, at the Lahore bureau, that I also started like comprehending Punjabi. And so again, as long as I could understand what they were asking me, I could then reply in very slow and basic Urdu, and they would understand.
Wow. And as you said, people are so friendly and so loving that they all understand the language of love. I mean, again, so inspiring, so inspirational. Amazing. Dr. Asim, what do you say? Should we maybe ask if someone in the audience or on Zoom who wants to interact with Naveed, or ask question? But again, Please keep your question very brief, and you have 30 seconds. If anyone has a question, please raise your hand and we will unmute your mic.
Naveed, if I may ask a question. So, like if I'm planning a trip or a trekking experience, so regarding physical fitness, how fit a person should be, what should be my BMI? And I'm just asking in medical terms, do I need to get more active or physically active to be part of that trekking experience?
I feel like it helps you enjoy that. I feel like it will be a better experience for you if you were more active in months, leading to your trek, as opposed to one day suddenly deciding that you want to trek. Um, you'll enjoy more. You'll get more out of your experience in the mountains if you are already, going on short hikes in Canada. You guys are blessed with some of the most beautiful landscape over there. And then you have a lot of trails, close to where you're located. So yeah, I mean, I would say not necessarily join a gym tomorrow, but slowly start going on easy day hikes, nature trails that are somewhat flat, and then slowly build up to some more incline. Eventually, put a backpack on with your essentials, and maybe one day do an overnight camp with your mates. But to answer your question, unless you're signing up on one of the base camp like K2 base camp expeditions or Nanga Parbat base camp or Rakaposhi base camp, the way my treks are designed are for the fastest and the slowest people in the group, because there's always, in all of my groups, there's always somebody who's extremely fast and in shape and someone who is the opposite. And that's not saying that that person has never gone hiking before. There's just always going to be faster and slower. So the way I design my treks, I always have a lead guide and a tail guide. And the point of having a tail guide is so that the slowest person, or the person who's just hurt him or herself and has to take it slow, can slow down, and can just walk at his or her pace without feeling too bad. So yeah, I mean, my suggestion would be, go on a few hikes every now and then, every weekend maybe, and whenever you're ready, just hit me up and I'll make sure you have a great time on a Pakistani trail.
Yeah. So I have a twin brother who's already walking about 10 miles a day. So
Right.
he's aiming to be there with you for Concordia trip. So
Okay.
if you get a call from someone who looks like me, then it may be him.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Naveed, for your time. It's nearly 2 hours. I know your time is really precious, and we have really enjoyed your talk. I'm going to try and summarize everything that I've learned from you, with your experiences, with your life-changing decisions, into a small closing statement. And this is what I felt as you were talking. I was jotting these words down just to kind of keep myself understand why you did what you did, what made you go through these life experiences the way you did, and how they changed you as a person. So again, it's just something that I put words down, and I think that'd be a nice closing statement for your talk. Um, Inspirational and motivational people have an amazing ability to change the way we feel about life. This is why we find them so interesting and crucial on our paths to. When we change the quality of our thinking, we change the quality of our life, and sometimes instantly. Just like a positive word can make someone smile, or a well timed humorous quote can make someone laugh, our thoughts react to the world in real time. We have complete control of only one thing in the universe, and that's our thinking. And that's where motivational personality like you come. I hope today you got the opportunity, to all my viewers, I hope today you got the opportunity to meet such an inspiring personality, and hopefully you will take the wonderful messages from the talk today. I'd like to close the session by saying a big round of thanks to the team who has organized today's session, as well as Naveed, to you for taking time out for this beautiful evening for us. I know it's been early morning rise for you, but thank you so much for honoring us, your presence and your story. When I'm in Pakistan, I'll surely like to hook up with you and maybe try my luck on some trekking experiences. Um, and I would like to talk to Zafar, or say special thanks to Zafar Yusufi, who's making sure that our session right now is going live on YouTube, and we have a recorded version. So if anyone who wants to revisit this to today's talk can actually access that. Zishan, you've been a wonderful co-host for me, and Pasha Bhai, you've handled the tail end with your technical skills with the videos very well, and Dr. Abdul you're always asset to have on the team. I'm going to finish up with a quote which I really like, and I think Naveed would second me on this, is that there is no limit to what you can accomplish, except the limits you place on your own thinking. Is that right, Naveed?
That's absolutely correct.
So with that being said, let's call our meeting adjourned. Thank you so much for everyone coming in, and may you have a blessed rest of your day and evening.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Naveed. Thank you, Dr. Asim. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, team.
Everybody, thank you.
Thank you all.
Hafiz, bye.
Bye, guys.